Yeah, first of all, hi everybody. Nice to be back and see you all there.
Hello.
Yeah, well, Eddie Scott and I joined P&O about the same time, 1970, and we both had a similar background. We both worked at Butlins and the holiday camps, and he had a terrific sense of humor, which I'll come back to a little bit later. And we worked together on the P&O ships twice. Once, the first time was in 1973 on Arcadia. That was the time that I was put on there by Peter Motion to bring in the Cruise Director concept to one of the big ships, the full-blooded Cruise Director concept. We'd done it on the Spirit of London. Because the Spirit of London then was a completely one-off job, a brand new concept. And now the company were interested in having the Cruise Director in charge of the entertainment rather than an entertainment officer under the staff captain, which had been the system for donkey's years. Well, luckily for me, they sent Eddie as my assistant. And he was a great, great assistant because he'd been in Arcadia before and he knew a lot of the people on board. And he knew the ship. I'd been there in 1970, but that was only for a brief period. Anyway, long story short, I was there to introduce the Cruise Director concept, and I was taken over, unfortunately, from an entertainment officer called Les Hunt, who many of you may have heard of. He had a certain name, Hunt, the you-know-what, and he was... I had about 2 weeks on board with him, and in that 2 weeks, wandering around, he was always wandering around like a spare dick at a wedding, and I could never quite figure out what the hell he did. Well, anyway, I eventually showed him my job spec as we were talking about him taking over and the Cruise Director, and I remember this, it was so funny. We were having a drink in one of the bars there, which is where Les spent most of his time.
Yep.
And I showed him my job spec, and he read through it, and he looked at me and he said, "Christ almighty, are you going to do all this?" And he almost choked on his drink. So that was Les. But eventually he left, and I don't know where he went after that, but I think he was around for a while. And Eddie Scott worked his socks off for me, really helped me get this thing going, and we were together for about 4 months. And then he then came to me again in Spirit of London in the summer of '74. This was the last Spirit of London Alaska cruise. At the end of that season, the name was going to be changed to Sun Princess. And Eddie and I had a great time. And we used to do a double act. We even did a double act up in the Starlight Lounge, and we called it Great Scott, It's Chapman. And he was a really, really funny guy. He was originally a stand-up comedian. That was what he came from. And he always had this thing when he told a joke, and he used to turn to the audience. He used to say, "Is that too naughty?" And he'd wait for the gag line, of course, and that's what happened there. So there we are. He stayed with me until the middle of the season. And the idea then, I was going to take him. I knew that I was going to the Island Princess later that year, and he was part of my team. But unfortunately for me, Eddie got promoted, and he got promoted to Cruise Director. So I must have done a very good job. He got promoted, and he went back to Arcadia as Cruise Director. And we didn't sail again, but we kept in touch. And he used to call me, and I used to call him. And he came out to stay with me once or twice on vacations out in Hollywood here, and we had a great time. And we met up once or twice at the Merchant Navy Hotel in Lancaster Gate. Many of you remember the Merchant Navy Hotel, Lancaster Gate, run by a splendid guy called Dudley. He was the general manager in those days. And he always wanted to make it quite clear, for obvious reasons, all of you know me, and Eddie was completely straight. He always made it quite clear to everybody and his friends that we had separate rooms. We were at the Merchant Navy Hotel. And he was a lovely guy. One other thing about Eddie, he loved playing bridge. He was excellent at bridge. And in the Alaskan season, we didn't have bridge lecturers on board anymore for that season. So he taught all the bridge classes. And I hate any card games. And bridge is something I can't stand and never figure out. And Eddie used to really piss me off because he was always trying to get me involved with bridge. But I never did, but it was something we used to joke about quite a lot. So we stayed in touch. And the last time I saw him was I think 1980, we were both on leave in London, stayed at the Merchant Navy Hotel. We went out for a good, we'd been out the night before, and we were both terribly hungover the next morning. And I saw him into his taxi, and he was very wobbly. And I remember him, the last face I saw was his face in the back of the taxi, waving to me. And then obviously he must have collapsed, and suddenly he disappeared. He must have fallen off the seat and disappeared. Knowing Eddie, he may have done it as a gag, but that was the last I saw of him. Great memories, and a very, very nice and a very funny fellow. After he left P&O, he left, I think he left in about 1980 or something, around that time anyway. I know in the 80s, 1984, he became a professional bridge player. And that's where he did a lot of very good work teaching bridge and taking bridge classes. And that's where he made his money for many, many years. But as I said, that was that last vision of him in the back of the taxi collapsing in a heap as he waved to me. That was the funniest thing I always remember about. So that's my experience of Eddie Scott. I was very upset because he's about the same age as me. I don't know what he passed. It wasn't Derek Wilmington, didn't tell me what it was yet. I don't know if anybody's heard anymore, but they had the funeral last Wednesday, I believe. And I sent condolences to his daughter, who I used to speak to on the telephone years ago when she was much younger. So that was my respect of the wonderful Eddie Scott.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks, Chris. That's great.
I've